The gunshots echoed in the distance as Thea Prescott clutched her small leather satchel and quickened her pace through the dusty streets of Silver Creek. It was 1878, and the Arizona Territory was no place for a woman alone, especially one with secrets as dangerous as hers. The setting sun cast long shadows across the dirt road as she approached the weathered sign of the Frontier Hotel, her last hope for shelter before nightfall. Thea's hands trembled as she adjusted her simple bonnet, careful to keep her face partially hidden. 3 weeks on the run had left her exhausted, her once fine dress now travel-worn and dusty. The stagecoach had deposited her in this remote mining town just hours ago, and already she felt eyes following her every move. She couldn't afford to be recognized, not after what happened in San Francisco. The hotel lobby was mercifully quiet as she approached the front desk, where an elderly clerk barely looked up from his newspaper. "Room for one, please," Thea said softly, placing several coins on the counter. "Just for a few nights." "Sign here," the man muttered, pushing a ledger toward her. Her hand hesitated over the page. Which name should she use this time? She'd been through 3 different identities since fleeing California. With a steady breath, she signed Thea Smith in flowing script. "Second floor, 3rd door on the right," the clerk said, sliding a key across the wooden counter. "Dining room's closed, but the saloon serves food till midnight." Thea nodded her thanks and climbed the narrow staircase, flinching at every creak in the floorboards. The room was sparse but clean, a simple bed, washstand, and chair beneath a small window overlooking the main street. She sank onto the mattress, finally allowing her shoulders to slump. How long could she keep running? The money wouldn't last forever. Sooner or later, she'd need to find work, establish herself somewhere. But the fear of discovery haunted her every waking moment. After washing the travel dust from her face and hands, hunger drove her downstairs to the adjoining saloon. The cacophony of piano music, laughter, and clinking glasses assaulted her senses as she entered. She kept her eyes down, making her way to a corner table far from the rowdy poker players and working girls. "What can I get you, miss?" A barmaid approached, her expression curious, but not unkind. "Just some stew, if you have it. And tea, please." As the barmaid walked away, the saloon doors swung open, and the room quieted momentarily. Thea glanced up to spite herself. A tall man stood in the doorway, trail dust coating his denim pants and the dark leather vest over his white shirt. His cowboy hat was pulled low, but she could see the hard line of his jaw, softened slightly by several days' worth of beard. A gun belt hung at his hip, the handle of his revolver worn smooth from use. He moved with easy confidence to the bar, exchanging familiar greetings with the barkeep. Several patrons clapped him on the shoulder as he passed. Clearly, he was known here and respected. "That's Yates Archer," the barmaid whispered as she set down Thea's stew. "Owns the biggest cattle spread north of town. Decent sort, unlike most who come through these doors." Thea merely nodded, keeping her gaze on her bowl. The last thing she needed was to attract the attention of a prominent local. Halfway through her meal, she felt a prickling sensation at the back of her neck. Looking up, she found herself staring directly into the intense blue eyes of the cowboy. He didn't look away when caught watching her, instead offering a slight nod of acknowledgement before turning back to his drink. Thea quickly finished her stew, left payment on the table, and hurried back to her room. As she locked her door, she tried to calm her racing heart. She was being paranoid. He was probably just curious about a new face in town. Nothing more. Still, she slept poorly that night, dreaming of pursuing footsteps and accusing voices. The morning brought no relief from her anxiety. Thea knew she needed supplies if she was to continue her journey, so she ventured out to the general store. Silver Creek was bustling with morning activity, miners heading to the hills, merchants opening shops, women gossiping as they fetched water from the town pump. The general store smelled of coffee, leather, and dried goods. Thea selected the essentials: quickly dried beef, hardtack, matches, and a small knife she could conceal in her boot. As she waited for the shopkeeper to wrap her purchases, the bell above the door jingled. "Morning, Mr. Archer," the shopkeeper called cheerfully. Thea froze, not daring to turn around. "Morning, Jim. Got my order ready." The cowboy's voice was deep and resonant, with a slight Texas drawl. "Sure do. Been waiting on those fence posts for a while, I reckon." Wolves took down the north line again, losing too many calves. Their conversation continued as Thea paid for her goods, keeping her back to the door. Just as she gathered her packages and turned to leave, she nearly collided with the broad chest of Yates Archer. "Pardon me, madam," he said, stepping aside. His eyes narrowed slightly as he recognized her from the previous night. "New to Silver Creek?" "Just passing through," Thea replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She made to move past him, but his next words stopped her cold. "Traveling alone isn't safe in these parts, especially for a lady trying to avoid notice." Her eyes snapped to his face, searching for threat or accusation, but found only concern. "I can manage, thank you," she said stiffly, clutching her packages tighter. "No doubt," he replied with a slight smile. "But if you need any assistance while you're here, folks know where to find me." Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and moved to the counter. Thea hurried outside, her heart pounding. Was her behavior so transparent? Or was the cowboy simply more observant than most? She spent the next 2 days in her hotel room, venturing out only for meals, which she took in her room rather than the saloon. On the third morning, she heard a commotion in the street and peered cautiously through her window. A stagecoach had arrived, and among the disembarking passengers stood a man in a fine suit and bowler hat. Even from a distance, Thea recognized him: William Foster, her former employer's business associate. One of the men who would know exactly who she was and what she'd done. Panic seized her. She had to leave immediately. Throwing her meager belongings into her satchel, she donned her bonnet and shawl. There was no time to settle her bill. She'd have to slip out the back way and hope to reach the livery stable unnoticed. The hotel's rear exit led to a narrow alley. Thea moved quickly, keeping close to the buildings. Just as she reached the end of the alley, a hand gripped her arm. She nearly screamed before a voice hissed, "This way." Yates Archer stood beside her, his expression grim. "Someone's asking about you at the hotel. Showing your likeness around." "How did you know time?" "My horse is behind the blacksmith's." "Come on." Every instinct told her not to trust him, but the alternative was worse. She followed him through a maze of back alleys until they reached a magnificent Palomino stallion tethered behind the smithy. "I can't go with you," she protested as he untied the horse. "You've got nowhere else to go, and whoever's looking for you isn't friendly," he said flatly. "I'm offering safe passage to my ranch. After that, you're free to move on if you choose." "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." His blue eyes studied her for a long moment. "Let's just say I recognize the look of someone who needs a second chance." Before she could argue further, shouts echoed from the direction of the hotel. Yates mounted in one fluid motion and extended his hand down to her. "Decision time, madam." With a silent prayer that she wasn't making a terrible mistake, Thea grasped his hand and allowed herself to be pulled up behind him. The horse bolted forward, and she had no choice but to wrap her arms around the cowboy's waist as they galloped out of town. They rode hard for nearly an hour, following a winding trail through rocky terrain and sparse pine forest. Eventually, the landscape opened into a vast valley, where a sprawling ranch house stood nestled against a backdrop of distant mountains. A weathered wooden sign reading, "Archer Ranch," marked the entrance to the property. Several ranch hands looked up from their work as Yates rode in, curiosity evident in their expressions at the sight of a woman riding behind their boss. He dismounted in front of the main house and helped Thea down, her legs wobbling after the long ride. "Rosa," he called, and a middle-aged Mexican woman appeared at the door. "Prepare the guest room, please. We have company." "Sí, Señor Yates," the woman replied, eyeing Thea with interest before disappearing inside. "You'll be safe here," Yates said, turning to Thea. "My foreman will ride into town later to see if that man's still asking questions." I don't know how to thank you," Thea stammered, suddenly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. She'd fled with a virtual stranger to his isolated ranch. Had she escaped one danger only to place herself in another? As if reading her thoughts, Yates's expression softened. "You don't need to be afraid here, Mississippi. Smith," she supplied automatically. "Thea Smith." Something in his eyes told her he knew it was a lie, but he simply nodded. "Miss Smith. You're welcome to stay as long as necessary. Rosa will see to your needs. I have work to attend to, but we'll talk at supper." With that, he strode toward the barn, calling out instructions to his men as he went. Thea watched him go, uncertain whether to feel relieved or terrified. Rosa returned and ushered her inside the ranch house. Despite its rustic exterior, the interior was surprisingly comfortable, with solid furniture and colorful woven rugs. The guest room was small but pleasant, with a window overlooking a kitchen garden. "Señor Yates, he is good man," Rosa said as she placed fresh linens on the bed. "You are safe here." Does he often bring strangers to stay?" Thea asked cautiously.
Rosa laughed. "No, señorita."
"You are the first." She patted Thea's hand. "Rest now. I bring water for washing." Left alone, Thea sank onto the edge of the bed. What had she gotten herself into? And why had this cowboy risked himself to help her? Most concerning of all, how long before her past caught up with her again? The next few days settled into an unexpected routine. Thea kept mostly to the house and garden, helping Rosa with cooking and mending to earn her keep. Yates was often gone from sunrise to sunset, managing his vast property, but they shared evening meals during which he spoke of cattle prices, weather forecasts, and local gossip, carefully avoiding any questions about her past. On the fourth evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Thea finally broke their unspoken agreement. "Why did you help me?" she asked quietly. Yates took a slow sip of coffee before answering. "Man in town was showing a wanted poster. Said you'd stolen valuable papers from a San Francisco banking house." Thea's blood ran cold. "And you believed him?" "Didn't say I did." He turned to look at her directly. "But I figured any woman running that hard must have her reasons." "You could be harboring a criminal," she pointed out. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Wouldn't be the first time someone found refuge at Archer Ranch." "You make a habit of rescuing fugitives, Mr. Archer?" "Only the ones who look like they deserve a second chance." His gaze held hers steadily. "And it's Yates, please." The following morning, Thea woke to the sound of hoofbeats. Peering through her window, she saw Yates's foreman, a weathered man named Hank, dismounting from a lathered horse. He and Yates conversed intensely before both men glanced toward the house. Minutes later, a knock came at her door. Yates stood in the hallway, his expression grave. "Foster's still in town," he said without preamble. "He's hired 2 men to search the outlying areas. Says you stole documents worth thousands." Thea felt the blood drain from her face. "I didn't steal anything." "I believe you," he said simply. "But I need to know what we're dealing with. Who is this man, and why is he so determined to find you?" She sank into a chair, the weight of her secrets suddenly unbearable. "William Foster was my employer's business partner. I worked as a secretary at Palmer Banking and Trust in San Francisco. I discovered discrepancies in the accounts. Large sums missing, with falsified records to cover the theft." "Foster was embezzling?" She nodded. "He and my employer, Mr. Palmer, were siphoning funds from client accounts, mostly widows and elderly people who wouldn't notice immediately. When I realized what was happening, I was going to report it to the authorities. But they discovered you knew, Yates concluded.
Yes.
I overheard them discussing what to do about me. Her voice broke. They were planning to have me committed to an asylum. Say I was unstable, imagining things. No one would believe a woman over two respected businessmen. So you ran. I took ledgers proving what they'd done. I thought if I could get to the federal marshal in Denver. She trailed off, twisting her hands in her lap. But Foster followed. He wants those records destroyed before I can prove anything. Yates was quiet for a long moment. These records, you still have them? Hidden in my things. If Foster finds them, dozens of people will lose everything they have, and he'll go unpunished. He paced the small room, thinking. We need to get those documents to the authorities. But not in Denver, that's too far with Foster and his men watching the trails. There's a federal judge in Tucson, Thea suggested. About 3 days' ride south.
Tucson it is then.
Yates nodded decisively. We'll leave tomorrow before dawn. For now, stay inside and away from windows. I'll make preparations. Thea stood, shaking her head. You've done enough. I can't ask you to risk more. You didn't ask.
His voice was firm.
And you won't make it alone with hired guns searching the territory. Why? She pressed. Why involve yourself in my troubles? You could lose everything, your ranch, your reputation. For the first time, Yates seemed uncertain. He looked away, then back at her, something unreadable in his blue eyes. 5 years ago, I watched my sister get destroyed by powerful men who thought they were above the law. No one stood for her then. His jaw tightened. I won't make the same mistake twice. Before she could respond, he left, closing the door quietly behind him. Thea stood motionless, her heart racing with a strange mix of fear and something else, something warm and unfamiliar that felt dangerously like hope. They departed in the gray light before sunrise, Thea dressed in men's clothing borrowed from one of the younger ranch hands. Her hair was tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and she rode her own mount, a steady mare Yates assured her could handle the journey. The precious ledgers were secured in his saddlebags. We'll take the mountain trail, he explained as they rode out. Longer route, but less chance of being spotted. Hank and 2 trusted hands would stay behind to maintain the illusion that Yates was still at the ranch, while Rosa had been instructed to say that the female guest had moved on days ago. The first day's journey took them through increasingly rugged terrain. Yates set a careful pace, watchful of their surroundings and considerate of Thea's less experienced riding. They spoke little, saving conversation for their brief rest stops. During one such break, as they watered the horses at a small creek, Thea studied her unlikely protector. In the dappled sunlight filtering through pine branches, she noticed a thin scar running along his jawline, partially hidden by his beard. Indian fight, he said, catching her gaze. Apache raid, 8 years back. Lost my father and older brother that day. I'm sorry, she said softly. He shrugged. Way of life out here. Or was before the treaties. He handed her a strip of jerky. What about your family? Anyone waiting for your return? Thea shook her head. My parents died in a fire when I was 16. I lived with my aunt until she passed 3 years ago. After that, I made my own way. No husband? Suitors? When she raised an eyebrow, he added, just trying to know who might come looking besides Foster. No one, she said simply. I focused on work, saving for my own small business someday. A bookshop, perhaps. Ambitious for a woman alone. Necessary, she corrected. Independence is the only security for a woman without family. He considered this, nodding slowly. Wise outlook. Lonely, though. Better lonely than dependent on someone who might, she stopped herself. Might what? He prompted. She busied herself adjusting her saddle. We should keep moving. They made camp that night in a sheltered hollow, with a small fire that cast just enough light to see by without attracting attention from a distance. After a simple meal of beans and hardtack, Thea wrapped herself in the blanket Yates offered and tried to get comfortable on the hard ground. "Get some sleep," he said, settling himself against a tree trunk, rifle across his lap. "I'll take first watch." "You need rest too," she objected. A smile flickered across his face. "Been sleeping with one eye open since I was 12, Miss Smith. Habit of the territory." "Thea," she said suddenly, "if we're to be traveling companions, you might as well use my given name." "Thea," he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. "Is that truly your name, or another invention?" She hesitated only briefly. "It's real. Thea Prescott." "Well then, Thea Prescott," he said with a slight nod. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be harder riding." Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. She watched Yates through half-closed eyes, noting how the firelight caught the golden streaks in his brown hair and deepened the lines around his eyes. What kind of man risked everything for a stranger's cause? And why did her heart beat faster whenever those blue eyes met hers? The second day brought them deeper into the mountains. By mid-afternoon, dark clouds gathered overhead, and the rumble of distant thunder warned of an approaching storm. "There's an old line shack about 2 miles ahead," Yates said, eyeing the sky with concern. "We'd best shelter there until it passes." The dilapidated cabin appeared just as the first heavy raindrops began to fall. It was little more than 4 walls and a roof, with a rusted stove and a single window covered with oilskin. But it was dry, and the storm that broke overhead would have drenched them to the skin in minutes. Yates unsaddled the horses and sheltered them beneath the cabin's small overhang, while Thea cleared debris from the interior. By unspoken agreement, he stepped outside to give her privacy, to change into dry clothes. When he returned, shaking water from his hat, he found her attempting to light the stove with damp matches. "Here," he said, kneeling beside her. From an inner pocket, he produced a small tin containing dry matches. The fire caught quickly, filling the tiny cabin with welcome warmth. They sat in companionable silence as rain drummed on the roof. Thea used the time to dry her damp hair, combing through the long chestnut waves with her fingers. She became aware of Yates watching her, his expression unguarded for once. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Nothing," he said, looking away. "Just. You look different with your hair down." "Different good or different bad?" A smile touched his lips. "Different beautiful." The words hung between them, unexpected and charged with meaning neither was prepared to acknowledge. Thea felt color rise in her cheeks and busied herself with braiding her hair. "How much farther to Tucson?" she asked, changing the subject. "Another day and a half, if the weather clears." He moved to the window, lifting the oilskin slightly to peer out at the storm. "Should pass by morning." "And then what happens?" "After we deliver the ledgers." He turned to face her. "You'll be free to go wherever you want. Start that bookshop, perhaps. And you'll return to your ranch as if nothing happened." "That's the plan." Thea nodded, ignoring the hollow feeling in her chest at the thought of parting ways. "It's a good plan." Later, as they shared the last of their jerky, Yates broke their silence. "Tell me about San Francisco. What's it like living in a real city?" She described the foggy mornings and bustling streets, the ships in the harbor, and the diverse mix of people. Her descriptions grew animated as she recalled the little details: the flower cellar on Market Street, the Chinese laundry where she took her best dress, the bookshop where she spent every spare penny. "Sounds like you miss it," he observed. "Parts of it," she admitted. "The libraries most of all. I've always found safety in books." Safety. When you're reading, you can be anyone, anywhere. Your life can be different. She stared into the fire. "Sometimes that's necessary." "And is that what you want?" A different life? She considered his question. I want a life where I'm not afraid, where I don't have to hide or run. Looking up, she met his gaze directly. What about you? Is ranching the life you chose, or the one you inherited? Bit of both, he said after a moment. Always knew I'd work the land, but planned to do it alongside my brother. After he died, everything changed. Responsibility fell to me earlier than expected. Do you ever regret it? Staying. He was quiet so long she thought he might not answer. Sometimes I wonder what else might have been, but the land gets in your blood, becomes part of who you are. Like books for me, she said softly. His smile reached his eyes this time. Like books for you. The storm raged through the night, but inside the small cabin, something shifted between them, a tentative bridge across the divide of their different worlds. Morning brought clearing skies and renewed urgency to their journey. They rode hard, stopping only when necessary to rest the horses. By late afternoon, they reached a ridge overlooking a vast desert basin. We'll camp here tonight, Yates decided. Too exposed to cross the flats before dark. As Thea helped gather firewood, movement in the distance caught her eye, a plume of dust on the trail behind them. Yates, she called, pointing. He was beside her in an instant, his expression grim as he studied the dust cloud through his field glass. 3 riders, he confirmed. Moving fast. Foster's men. Most likely. We've got maybe an hour before they reach this position. He began quickly repacking their supplies. We need to move.
Now.
They abandoned the idea of a fire and rode down the backside of the ridge, using the terrain to shield them from view. As darkness fell, they pushed on across the desert, guided by stars and Yates's unerring sense of direction. There's a trading post about 10 miles ahead, he explained as they rode. Man who runs it owes me a favor. Might be able to throw them off our trail. Thea's mare stumbled in the darkness, nearly unseating her. Yates reached over to steady both horse and rider. You all right? Yes, she answered, though exhaustion weighed heavily on her. I can keep going. His hand lingered on her arm. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Thea Prescott. The unexpected compliment warmed her more than it should have. So are you, Yates Archer. It was nearly midnight when they reached the trading post, a low adobe building with a corral and water tank. A single lamp burned in the window. Yates dismounted and rapped a specific pattern on the door, which opened to reveal a grizzled man with a shotgun. Archer? What in tarnation? Need your help, Joe. We're being followed. The old trader eyed Thea suspiciously, but stepped aside to let them enter. Inside, the single room was cluttered with merchandise, barrels of flour and sugar, hanging tools, stacks of blankets and clothing. This about them papers folks are searching for? Joe asked, setting his shotgun aside. Yates tensed. What have you heard? Pair of hard cases came through yesterday, asking about a woman and a cowboy traveling south. Joe spat into a bucket. Offered good money for information. What did you tell them? Told 'em I ain't seen nobody, Joe snorted. But they'll be back. Road to Tucson passes right by here. Yates and Thea exchanged worried glances. Their pursuers were ahead of them now, likely watching the road. We need another route, Yates said. Joe scratched his beard thoughtfully. There's the old Smuggler's Trail, through Devil's Canyon. Adds half a day, but only locals know it exists. Can you draw us a map? While Joe sketched directions on a scrap of paper, Thea sank onto a bench, the events of the day finally catching up with her. She must have dozed off, because the next thing she knew, Yates was gently shaking her shoulder. We need to move, he said softly. Joe's given us fresh horses and supplies. Says we can leave ours here, they're too recognizable. Outside, 2 sturdy Mustangs stood saddled and ready. Joe handed Yates a battered leather map case. Trails marked. Stick to it, and you'll reach Tucson by tomorrow night. He glanced at Thea. Whatever trouble you're in, girl, This fella's a good one to have at your side. I know, she said simply. They rode out under a waning moon, following the faint trail that wound through increasingly broken terrain. By dawn, they entered Devil's Canyon, a narrow, twisting passage between towering rock walls. The footing was treacherous, forcing them to dismount and lead the horses through the worst sections. Not much farther to the other side, Yates assured her as they paused to rest the horses. Then in its open country to Tucson. Thea leaned against a sun-warmed boulder, stretching her aching legs. I've never seen country like this. It's beautiful in a harsh way. That's Arizona for you. Beautiful and unforgiving. He passed her canteen. Like some people I've met. She smiled at the implied compliment. I'm not unforgiving, just cautious. With good reason. He studied her face in the golden morning light. When this is over, what then? I don't know, she admitted. I can't go back to San Francisco. Could stay in Arizona. Her heart skipped at what remained unsaid. And do what? Open that bookshop in Tucson? Why not?
Or.
He hesitated, then plunged ahead. Archer Ranch could use someone with a head for figures. Ranch accounts are a mess. Are you offering me employment, Mr. Archer? For starters, he said, holding her gaze. Before she could respond, the sharp crack of a rifle shot echoed through the canyon. Rock fragments exploded from the boulder inches from Thea's head. Down, Yates shouted, pulling her behind cover as another shot rang out. Heart pounding, Thea pressed against the rough stone. How did they find us? Must have spotted us entering the canyon. Yates drew his revolver, peering cautiously around the boulder. I count 2 of them up on the rim. A voice called down from above. Give up the woman and the papers, Cowboy. No need for anyone to die today. That's Foster, Thea whispered, recognizing the voice with a chill of fear. Yates's jaw hardened. Not happening, he shouted back. You want her. You come through me. A volley of shots answered him, peppering their shelter with stone chips. When I give the word, run for those rocks, Yates instructed, pointing to a larger outcropping 20 yards ahead. I'll cover you. We go together, she insisted. Thea, together, she repeated firmly. Or not at all. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, and perhaps admiration. On 3, then. 1, 2, 3. They sprinted across the open ground as gunfire erupted above them. Thea felt the wind of a bullet pass her cheek just before they crashed into the shelter of the rocks. Yates winced as they landed, and she noticed with horror a spreading crimson stain on his left sleeve. You're hit. Just a graze, he grimaced, though his face had paled beneath his tan. We need to keep moving. The horses, their mounts had bolted at the first gunshot, disappearing down the canyon. They'll head back to the trading post, Yates said, tearing a strip from his bandana to bind the wound. We continue on foot. For the next hour, they played a deadly game of cat and mouse, moving from cover to cover while their pursuers tried to pin them down. The canyon narrowed further, offering more hiding places, but making forward progress painfully slow. They're trying to wear us down, Yates muttered as they crouched behind a fallen boulder. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and Thea worried that his wound was worse than he admitted. Wait for nightfall, when they can come in close. The ledgers, Thea said suddenly. Give them to me. What are you planning? She met his gaze steadily. This is my fight, not yours. I won't have your death on my conscience. Not a chance, he said flatly. We finish this together. Yates, please, no. His hand closed over hers. I didn't bring you this far to abandon you now. The intensity in his blue eyes left her breathless. In that moment, despite their desperate situation, something profound passed between them, an unspoken promise that transcended their brief acquaintance. A rattling sound above them broke the spell. Loose stones cascaded down the canyon wall as one of their pursuers attempted to climb down for a better shot. Now's our chance, Yates whispered. While they're separated, run for the bend ahead. Don't stop until you're out of sight. This time, Thea didn't argue. They dashed forward as Yates fired 2 shots to keep the climber pinned down. The canyon curved sharply, and as they rounded the bend, they found themselves facing a narrow crevice in the rock wall. In here, Yates urged, squeezing through the opening. Thea followed, finding herself in a small cave barely large enough for both of them. Outside, they could hear their pursuers shouting to each other. They must have gone this way. Spread out. Check every nook. Pressed together in the confined space, they hardly dared breathe. Yates's arm encircled Thea protectively, and she could feel his heart racing against her back. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as footsteps approached, then receded. Think they're gone, she whispered finally.
For now.
But they'll double back when they realize they've lost our trail. He shifted slightly, and she felt him wince. We should rest while we can. In the dim light filtering through the crevice, she examined his wounded arm. The makeshift bandage was soaked through. This needs proper attention, she said, using her canteen to clean the wound. The bullet had carved a deep furrow along his upper arm, but thankfully hadn't lodged in the flesh. She bound it with strips torn from her petticoat, working by touch in the near darkness. Where did you learn to dress wounds? He asked, his voice husky from pain. My father was a doctor before the fire, she explained. I used to assist him sometimes. You're full of surprises, Thea Prescott. So are you, Yates Archer. She secured the bandage. Why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's just about your sister. In the close confines of their hiding place, she felt rather than saw his hesitation. From the moment I saw you in that saloon, he said finally, something told me you were different. Someone worth knowing, worth protecting. His voice dropped lower. Maybe worth loving, given time. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Thea's throat tightened with emotion. You don't even know me, she whispered. I know enough. His hand found hers in the darkness. I know you're brave and principled. I know you risked everything to do what's right. The rest are past, your secrets that's yours to share when you're ready. She laced her fingers through his, drawing strength from his steady presence. And if some of those secrets are ugly, if I've done things I'm not proud of, haven't we all? His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. The past shapes us, but it doesn't define us. Outside, daylight was fading. Soon they would need to move, to make their final push toward Tucson and the federal judge who represented Thea's only hope for justice. But for this moment, sheltered in a cave with a man who'd risked his life for her, Thea allowed herself to imagine a future beyond running, a future where she might belong somewhere. With someone. If we survive this, she said softly, I might take you up on that offer. The ranch accounts, I mean. She felt rather than saw his smile. I was hoping you might. Night fell fully before they dared leave their hiding place. Moving silently through the darkness, they followed the canyon's winding path. Yates's wound had stiffened, but he refused to slow their pace. Canyon opens about a quarter-mile ahead, he whispered. Then it's 6 miles across open desert to the outskirts of Tucson. We'll never make it on foot before dawn, Thea worried. Not with Foster's men still searching. Don't need to reach town. There's a stage station just beyond the canyon mouth. If we can get there, we can send word to the federal marshal. They emerged from the canyon into star-filled darkness, the desert stretching before them like a vast, shadowy sea. In the distance, a pinprick of light marked the stage station Yates had mentioned. Keep low and move quickly, he instructed. Use the brush for cover when you can. They had covered perhaps half the distance when the crack of a rifle shattered the night's silence. A bullet kicked up dirt at Thea's feet, and she stumbled backward. Go. Yates shoved her toward a cluster of barrel cacti. I'll draw them off. No, she cried, but he was already moving away, firing his revolver to attract their pursuers' attention. Torn between following his instructions and refusing to abandon him, Thea made a split-second decision. Reaching into the saddlebag Yates had carried throughout their journey, she extracted the damning ledgers. "Foster," she shouted, rising to her full height. "I have what you want. Let him go, and the papers are yours." "Thea, don't." Yates's voice called from the darkness. But it was too late. Foster and one of his hired guns emerged from the shadows, weapons trained on her. "Wise decision, Miss Prescott," Foster said, his urbane manner incongruous with the wilderness setting. "Now, slide those ledgers over here, and no one needs to get hurt." "Let him go first," Thea demanded, clutching the books to her chest. Foster's companion, a scarred man with cold eyes, moved to flank her. "You ain't in a position to negotiate, lady." "Oh, but she is," came Yates's voice, startlingly close. The click of his revolver's hammer preceded him stepping into view, his gun pressed against Foster's temple. "Drop it," he ordered the scarred man. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the hired gun lowered his weapon. "You won't shoot me," Foster said, though sweat beaded on his forehead. "You'd hang for murder." "Self-defense ain't murder," Yates replied evenly. "Now, we're all going to walk nice and peaceful to that stage station yonder. The federal marshal can sort this out. And if I refuse, then Miss Prescott keeps those ledgers, and I telegraph every newspaper from here to San Francisco about how William Foster embezzled from widows and orphans." Yates pressed the gun barrel harder against Foster's head. "Your choice." Foster's shoulders slumped in defeat. "You've ruined me either way." "You ruined yourself," Thea said quietly. The stage station keeper was understandably startled when 4 people, 2 of them at gunpoint, arrived at his door in the middle of the night. But the presence of a federal marshal's deputy, coincidentally waiting for the morning stage, proved providential. By dawn, Foster and his accomplice were secured in the station's storage room, and a telegram had been sent to Tucson requesting official transport. The deputy, after examining the ledgers, assured Thea that the evidence was more than sufficient for prosecution. "You'll need to give testimony, of course," he explained as they sat around the station's pot-bellied stove. "But with these records and my report, I'd say Foster and his partner will be facing considerable prison time." Relief washed over Thea like a physical force. After weeks of running, of constant fear, it was finally over. She looked across at Yates, who sat patiently enduring the station keeper's wife's ministrations to his wounded arm. Their eyes met, and a silent understanding passed between them. This chapter was ending, but perhaps another was beginning. The journey to Tucson and the subsequent legal proceedings consumed the next 2 weeks. Foster and Palmer both faced charges of embezzlement and fraud, with Thea's testimony providing the crucial narrative to accompany the damning financial records. Yates remained by her side throughout, a steady presence during the sometimes grueling questioning. When the judge finally announced that both men would stand trial in San Francisco, with every expectation of conviction, Thea felt as though a great weight had lifted from her shoulders. "It's really over," she said as they walked from the courthouse into the late afternoon sunshine. "I can stop running." "Any thoughts about where you'll stop?" Yates asked, his tone carefully casual. She glanced up at him, noting the uncertainty in his usually confident demeanor. "I seem to recall a certain rancher mentioning his accounts were in disarray." A slow smile spread across his face. "Offer still stands." "Just the accounts? Nothing more?" She surprised herself with her boldness. Yates took her hand, drawing her to a stop in the middle of the boardwalk. Passers-by flowed around them as he searched her face with those intense blue eyes. "Thea Prescott, I think you know I'm offering a great deal more than employment." He took a deep breath. "These past weeks, getting to know you, protecting you, fighting alongside you, they've meant more to me than I can express." "Yates, let me finish," he said gently. "I know it's fast." I know you've barely had time to breathe, let alone think about the future. But I want you to know that whatever you decide, wherever you go next, my feelings won't change. And what feelings are those? She asked, her heart racing. Instead of answering, he bent and kissed her, right there on Tucson's main street. It was a tender kiss, questioning rather than demanding, and Thea found herself responding with all the emotion she'd held in check during their desperate journey. When they parted, she saw in his eyes the same wonder she felt. I think, she said, finding her voice, that I'd like to see Archer Ranch again. In less dramatic circumstances this time. His smile could have lit the darkening sky. I can arrange that. The return journey to the ranch was decidedly more leisurely than their flight to Tucson had been. They traveled by stagecoach for part of the way, then by hired buggy for the final stretch. As the familiar valley came into view, with the ranch house nestled against the mountains, Thea felt a surprising sense of homecoming. Rosa rushed out to greet them, exclaiming over their appearance and immediately ushering them inside for a proper meal. The ranch hands tipped their hats respectfully to Thea, having clearly been informed of her role in their boss's recent adventure. That evening, after the household had settled, Yates found Thea sitting on the porch swing, gazing at the star-filled sky. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, joining her. "I was thinking about fresh starts," she replied. "How rare and precious they are." He nodded, understanding. "And is that what you want? A fresh start here?" She turned to face him fully. "I've spent so long running from the past, I'm not sure I know how to build a future." Her voice softened. "But I'd like to try. With you, if that's what you're offering." Yates took her hands in his. "What I'm offering is everything I have and everything I am. Today, tomorrow, for as long as you'll have me. Even with my complicated history? Especially with your history. It's made you who you are." His eyes held hers steadily. She hid her past in fear. Cowboy whispered, "Then let me be your future without questions." Tears pricked Thea's eyes at the simple poetry of his words. "No questions?" "None that matter," he assured her. "The only question worth asking is whether you'll stay. Whether you might consider making this your home. Making us a family." She reached up to touch his face, tracing the scar along his jaw with gentle fingers. "I think I'd like that very much." Their kiss was unhurried this time, a promise rather than a question. When they finally drew apart, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Thea Prescott. Have since you nearly knocked me over in that general store, looking terrified and determined all at once." She laughed softly. "I thought you were the most dangerous man I'd ever met. Turns out I was right dangerous to my plans of remaining alone forever." "Is that such a bad thing?" "No," she whispered. "It's the best thing that's ever happened to me." In the months that followed, Thea transformed not only the ranch's chaotic accounting system, but the house itself. Under her guidance, the comfortable but sparse rooms became a true home, with books lining newly built shelves and colorful textiles softening the rustic furniture. She discovered an unexpected talent for ranch management, her quick mind grasping the complexities of cattle breeding and market prices. The hands, initially skeptical of the city woman, soon came to respect her business acumen and unflagging work ethic. For his part, Yates watched her blossom with undisguised pride and deepening love. The haunted look that had shadowed her eyes when they first met gradually faded, replaced by quiet confidence and genuine happiness. They were married the following spring in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Rosa weeping joyfully and the hands dressed in their Sunday best. Judge Collins, who had presided over Foster and Palmer's preliminary hearing, traveled from Tucson to officiate a gesture that touched Thea deeply. "Never thought I'd see the day," Hank commented at the celebration afterward. "Boss always said he was married to this land." "Still am," Yates replied, his arm around his new wife. "Just found room in my heart for one more commitment." Later that night, as they stood on the porch of what was now truly their home, Thea leaned against her husband's solid strength. "Happy?" he asked, dropping a kiss on the top of her head. "Completely." She turned in his embrace to face him. "Though I do have one confession to make." His expression remained open, unconcerned. "Oh, I've been corresponding with a bookseller in San Francisco. I may have ordered enough volumes to start a small lending library in town." Yates laughed, the sound rich and warm in the night air. "Why am I not surprised? Always knew you couldn't give up books entirely." "The children need education," she said, suddenly serious. "Our children someday, and others in the area." His eyes softened at the mention of future family. "Our children will have everything we can give them: books, land, and parents who love each other fiercely." "Is that a promise, Mr. Archer?" "It's a guarantee, Mrs. Archer." He sealed the vow with a kiss that held all the passion and tenderness of their extraordinary journey together. 5 years later, Thea stood in the doorway of Archer Ranch, watching as Yates taught their 4-year-old son to sit astride his first pony. Little Matthew, named for Yates's fallen brother, giggled with delight as the gentle mount took a few careful steps around the corral. Their 2-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, squirmed in Thea's arms, eager to join the excitement. "My turn, Mama. My turn. When you're a bit older, sweetheart," Thea laughed, adjusting the child on her hip. Her free hand rested on the gentle swell of her abdomen, where their third child grew. The past 5 years had brought changes beyond their growing family. The small lending library Thea had established in Silver Creek had evolved into a proper schoolhouse, where she taught reading and arithmetic 2 days each week. Archer Ranch had prospered under their joint management, expanding its holdings and adopting innovative breeding practices that made it the most successful operation in the territory. Foster and Palmer had been convicted and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. Their victims, thanks to Thea's testimony and the recovered funds, had received most of their money back. The story had made newspapers across the country, hailing Thea as a heroine who had risked everything for justice. Yet for all these public triumphs, it was the private happiness that Thea treasured most: the family she and Yates had built together, founded on trust and unconditional acceptance. As if sensing her thoughts, Yates looked up from the corral and smiled at her, that same smile that had first warmed her heart in a dusty trading post during their desperate flight. He lifted Matthew from the pony and strode toward the house, their son perched proudly on his shoulders. "I think we have a natural-born horseman here," he announced, setting the boy down on the porch steps. "Like father, like son," Thea replied, leaning in to accept his kiss. "Everything ready for the anniversary celebration tomorrow?" he asked, taking Elizabeth from her arms. Thea nodded. "Rosa's been baking since sunrise. Half the county's coming, from the sounds of it." 5 years, Yates mused, wrapping his free arm around her waist. "Best 5 years of my life." Later that night, after the children were asleep, they sat together on the porch swing that had become their special place for quiet conversation. The mountain air carried the scent of pine and sage, and a full moon silvered the landscape. "I found something today," Yates said, reaching into his pocket. "Cleaning out that old trunk in the attic." He handed her a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. Thea opened it to find a wanted poster, her own face staring back at her, alongside the reward Foster had offered for her capture. "Should have burned this years ago," he said apologetically. "Forgot I had it." Thea traced the image with her fingertip, remembering the terrified young woman she had been. "No, I'm glad you kept it. It reminds me how far we've come." "Any regrets?" he asked, his arm tightening around her shoulders. She thought of the city life she'd left behind, the bookshop she'd once dreamed of owning. Then she looked at the man beside her, the home they'd created, the family they were raising. "Not one," she said truthfully. "Everything that happened, even the fear and the running, led me here, to you." She leaned against him contentedly. I couldn't ask for a better future than the one we've built. Then or now, Yates murmured. You never have to hide from me, Thea. Not your past, not your dreams, not your fears. I know. She turned her face up to his. That's why I fell in love with you, Yates Archer. You saw me, truly saw me when I was trying my hardest not to be seen. His kiss was as tender as the first they'd shared, yet deepened by years of partnership and shared life. Best decision I ever made, he said when they parted, following my instincts about that mysterious woman in the Silver Creek Hotel. And the best words anyone ever said to me, she replied. Let me be your future, without questions. Under the vast Arizona sky, surrounded by the land they both loved, Thea and Yates Archer continued writing their story together, no longer fugitives from the past, but architects of a future built on love, trust, and the courage to begin again.